wonderful to be here in person after the meeting we had to get the survey ready. So this will be much clearer, no audio difficulties. Just to remind everybody what we talked about, or what we did for the city, the methodology. We spoke with 400 randomly selected residents across the community. The interviews were conducted between February 1st and February 22nd. The average interview time is 24 minutes. The non-response rate, once we told them we're not voter IDing them, we're not selling them anything, and we give them an opportunity to make an appointment. You can see the field work takes almost 3 weeks. Instead of doing it in 2 nights and having an astronomical refusal rate with whoever answers the phone and having a very unrepresentative sample, approximately 50% of these calls were completed by appointment. So when it was convenient for the person to take the survey, not when it was convenient for us to give the survey. The 400 sample, always projectable to within plus or minus 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. That applies if it's 400 in the city of Columbia Heights, 400 in Anoka County, or 400 in the state of Minnesota. The margin of error is determined by the size of the sample, not the percent of the population it represents. I thought I'd put up some demographics so you can see. Folks are always interested at first about the cell phone distribution. You're just short of a majority, 49% cell phone only households, 15% landline only. They exist. Very different demographics, and the 36% have both landline and cell phone. If we continue with the methodology, continuing with the demographics, we asked folks how long have they lived in the city. You have a big split, a wide variation here. Actually, the average time in the community comes in at about 9 years. You have 28% that have been in the city for 5 years or less. You have 31% over 20-year residents. So it really is divided between 10-year less than 10-year and more than 10-year residents. You also have 27% that are 18 to 34. You have 40% that are over the age of 55, with 1 in 4 being over the age of 65. 26% indicated that they had a senior citizen over the age of 65 in their household. At the same time, 26% had a school-age child or a preschooler in the household. 68% were homeowners, 32% were renters. If we continue with the demographics, looking at the ethnicity, 60% indicated they were white, 19% African American, 10% Hispanic Latino, and then a variety of people of color. We also asked about the primary language spoken in the house. 88% indicated English, 7% Spanish, 2% each Somali and Hmong, and 2% indicated scattered languages. Finally, looking at the demographics, we asked folks about their financial situation. And this question asked folks to think about their income and their expenses and how is it matching up. This has been a fascinating question to track over the course of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the norm financially stressed was about 28%. What we saw, the height of the pandemic, and for the height of the pandemic for the financially stressed, was the second shutdown around Thanksgiving of 2020, where the financially stressed got to 53%. It's come back down into the low 30s, but now over the last month, 6 weeks, between inflation, gas prices, groceries, it's growing again. The last statewide we did, we actually had 40% saying they're financially stressed. So it's on the move back. We have not gone back to where it was pre-pandemic. We asked the gender, 50% female, 49% male, 1% non-binary, and then we can see the geographic distribution of the 8 precincts. Normally at this point, before I go into the data, any questions on methodology, demographics, or anything? No? Okay, survey says, first off, what do folks like most about this living in the city of Columbia Heights? You have 6 answers that hit double digits, all within the margin of error, so it's just this cluster. 16% talk about the closeness to family, 15% close to job, 15% small town feel, 14% talk about their neighborhood or the housing, 11% the convenient location, 10% say safe. The 10% safe to your proximity to either Minneapolis or St. Paul is significant. You're going to see folks do feel safe in the community, even with the proximity to Minneapolis. And then what else comes in? Parks and trails close to shopping, schools, and quiet and peaceful. There's no one item that folks resonate to on what they value most about the city of Columbia Heights. Now, if we ask what they like most, we normally follow up and ask what the most serious issue facing the city is. You do have one concern that hits more than 20%, not surprising, and that has to do with the proximity, but it's from the outside. It's not, they don't feel it here, they're worried about it coming, and that's crime at 22%. 13% talk about street maintenance. We'll talk about that a little more in depth when we go through the city services. 12% say high taxes. That's right at the norm. Anywhere between 10 and 15%. We're going to look at that question in a little more depth also on taxes. And then everything else is in single digits. Aging infrastructure, property maintenance, the aging park system, lack of business. Down at the bottom is what we call the boosters. They say there are no problems in the city. And that's 11%, about 1 in 9 in the community. But the pandemic, it's made everybody less enthusiastic, and they spent a lot of time in their community, more so than they have in the past. So they've become more critical of things. And so the booster rate, which was the norm, was 8%, 1 in 12 people, is down to about 5%. So you're double that booster rate, and it's very strong showing when we look at the most serious issue and how folks are feeling about their community. Now, in overall evaluation, we ask about the quality of life. 89% rate it favorably, 11% say only fair, one person said poor, but that doesn't appear because it's 1 out of 4, it's less than 1%. What you have is 89% then favorable. Now, most cities, it's 85 to 95%. People don't live for a long time in a city that they think is only fair or poor. They're going to look for another community. What differentiates communities, though, is the excellent rating. Minnesotans are very difficult graders. We don't get enthusiastic about a lot of things. In fact, when you follow up with those that say good and say what could make it excellent, you'll have a certain percentage of those folks say nothing. Good's good enough. We don't need to be excellent. So in looking at the 24% differentiation, that has gone down over the course of the pandemic. The norm excellent rating right now in quality of life is down to 14%. Before the pandemic, it was just under 20%. So you're almost double on the enthusiastic rating of the excellent quality of life in the district. An evaluation of community characteristics. This is set up as a stoplight. Red means too few, bring more in. Or actually, no, I've reversed it actually in the chart. Shouldn't have. Too many is the green actually. The red is too few, they'd like more, and the yellow is about right. And actually what you see is a lot of yellow. You have majorities of the community on every one of these saying you have about the right amount, from 52 all the way up to 81%. Now, where's their interest in having more of some characteristics? Well, 38% talk about trails and bikeways. 34% sidewalks, athletic fields, courts, and rinks at 26%, and parks and open spaces at 21%. What I tell clients when you look at this is take the too few, look at the too many, and you cross you come out negative or positive. So you actually have plus 17% more folks wanting more parks and open spaces. On trails and bikeways, it's plus 33%. About 1 in 3. You don't have, some communities will have 50% saying there's not enough. You don't have that, but there would be 3 areas, and you're going to see on this, because I put in the park improvements we tested, there's an appetite not only for support for property tax increase, but for what they see as too few, beyond just the folks saying it's too few, but an investment for those saying it's about right at this time. Now, do they support financial incentives to attract development? Absolutely. 81% support it, 13% oppose, and 8% are unsure. This question, I've been doing this a long time, 28 years. Before the recession of 2008, Minnesotans did not like financial incentives for development. Typically opposed 45% support with 55% opposition. The recession changed everything in the state on the support for financial incentives to bring development in. So right now the norm is about 75% support for financial incentives for the development. So you're a little bit even higher than the norm. There is an appetite out there. Code enforcement. Now, this is set up like the stoplight. Not tough enough. Green, they want more code enforcement. Red, you're too tough. No, I've reversed this. I apologize. I reversed both of these charts. Not tough enough is the red. Too tough is the green. So what it washes out, you have the majority of folks saying you're doing about the right amount on the code enforcement. 56% all the way up to 90 and 91% on the storage of cans and the storage of lawn tools in the yards. If there are two areas that residents would like you to focus on, it would be junk and debris in yards at 37% and the deteriorating homes at 32%. Four others come in with about a quarter of folks indicating they would like it to be tougher. Junk vehicles, lawn, grass, and weeds, loud noise, and winter parking restrictions. But once again, you don't have 40, 50, 60% saying you're not tough enough on something. You're really doing a pretty good job in comparison. The one area that always kind of washes out with people saying too tough and not tough enough is always the winter parking restrictions. For every one person you make happy, you make another person unhappy. But at the end, 60% are right about in the middle. That actually, when you're looking at a public policy, you've really kind of found the sweet spot in a sense on the winter parking restrictions. Now, if we look at the city service evaluations and just kind of look at this big picture, I won't go through every single one. We're looking for a sea of blue instead of a red riptide, and we have that. In fact, what I did, and I thought it'd be interesting for you to see, is the difference between the excellent and the good, because there is very little of the only fair poor. I just combined that into the red. So what are folks very enthusiastic about? The fire service and garbage and recycling. 48 and 43% rating at excellent. The police at 36%. You can see very little criticism until we get down to the highest is city street maintenance. 68% rated favorable, 31% unfavorable. Okay, that shows something to work on, but I'll give you the norm right now because it's really important. At the time of year we do this, and this varies, the norm on street repair and maintenance is 45% negative right now. On snow plowing, the norm negative right now is 35%. Your results would be different in August because everybody forgets about the snow plow that hits the mailbox and everything like that. So relatively speaking, for the time of year, there's strong ratings. But they're an opportunity to make improvements on the street repair and maintenance. The code enforcement at 25%, and you can see the areas that folks would want you to focus on. Norm on that right now is about 20%. Everything else for the ratings is above the norm for positive and below the norm for negative. Now, I mentioned for the most serious issue that high taxes came in. I believe it was 10%. What about when we asked specifically, how do you feel about city property taxes? Are they very high, somewhat high, about average, somewhat low, or very low? You actually have 30% saying high, 57% about average. You actually have 4% that say low. I have their names and numbers, and 9% say they're unsure. What I would call the city of Columbia Heights is you're tax sensitive. What is a tax hostile community? It's when the very high and somewhat high go over 50%. You're not even anywhere close to that. So that doesn't mean everybody is thrilled about taxes. It means that they're not, you don't have that high property tax opposition that a lot of other communities have. Just to give you an example, the community go unnamed, in the last 18 months, the highest we have for the very high and somewhat high is 66%. That's a difficult environment to talk really about any sort of property tax increases. So it really is not the concern. And we have seen a dissipation of the property tax hostility over the course of the pandemic. The norm on this would be about 44-45% in the high category. So you're significantly below that norm also. Now, does this mean that they're willing to see a property tax increase? Well, to maintain city services, yes. 80% would support a property tax increase to maintain the services currently offered by the city. What about a property tax increase to improve or enhance city services? Not so much. 40% support, 47% oppose, and 13% want to know which city services are going to be improved before they say if they favor or oppose. So there definitely is an appetite for a property tax increase to maintain, but not necessarily blanket approval to improve or enhance city services. So the key question, in my opinion, when I look at a city survey is the question, this is where the rubber hits the road. When you think about the services offered by the city and the property taxes you pay, how do you rate that value? You have 76% rating it favorably, 18% say only fair or poor, and 6% are unsure. This one, we look at a ratio. Since it's 76 to 18, it's about 4 to 1, favorable to unfavorable on this ratio. The norm on it right now is 2.5 to 1. So you're very strong in the value. That equates back to both things we looked at. The high rating for city services, but then similarly, you have a mitigated concern on property taxes, which wash out with 3/4 of residents indicating they do receive at least a good value, if not an excellent value, for the property taxes paid. Now, we saw that 22% were concerned that the most serious issue facing the community was rising crime. What about when we asked specifically about their feelings in the city of Columbia Heights? 93% feel safe in the city of Columbia Heights. We're going to do a blanket statement on first ring suburban communities touching Minneapolis and St. Paul. The norm on that is 20% saying no. Okay? Do they feel safe in their immediate neighborhood alone at night? Your folks, 80% say yes, 18% say no. The norm in the first ring is 40% saying no, they don't feel safe. Do they feel safe using city parks and using city trails? 94 to 4. The norm on that is 12%. And then you do have a unique one. We don't test this very often. Do they feel safe using city buildings? 96 to 2. And that's where I say the concern on crime is something that comes across the border. It's not so much what's happening here, it's they're concerned about what could happen here. What about contact with the police department? 28% indicated they had contacted the police, had contact with the police department. How do they rate that contact? 95% rated favorably, 5% only fair or poor, a majority rated as excellent. And it really is important to note, this isn't the community as a whole. This is everybody who's had contact. Obviously, some of those contacts were probably less desirable and unwanted by the person that had the contact. To only have 5% only fair or poor is very strong. I mean, typically you have 20%, the threshold on this one. And so the police department is very well regarded in the community. Switch over to City Park and Recreation. First off, programming. 35% say yes, that they have participated in City Park and Recreation programs in the past. Actually, that's very high, considering that you have 26% households with children. And so if you put that, you have use beyond the children, the typical base for city recreation programs. How do folks feel about the programs? Overwhelmingly positive, 93 to 6. We did follow up with those that said no, they had not participated in city recreation programs, and asked why not. You can see that arrayed underneath the pie on the left-hand side. 43%, so that's 43% of 65%, about 30% of the community saying they're not interested. 24% indicate no time, 17% indicate age or health problems. So it's not a lack of awareness. The interest level, when you look at it, really comes into play with the older group. They're not interested in those sorts of activities anymore. Now, we saw that earlier on in the survey with regards to property taxes, when we looked at maintaining and enhancing, there was a difference. We went through four items that we worked with on the council and asked specifically, would you support a property tax increase for this purpose? Once again, I split out the strong support from support because the highest opposition you had in concept was 21%. Now keep in mind, this is in concept. We're not telling them how much this costs. That'll be the devil in the details when it comes down. But there's vast support for all of it. What leads the list is the renovation of city parks. 84% support, 14% oppose, with 44% strongly supporting. Public art and beautification projects, 81% support, 16% oppose, with 41% strong support. Renovation of Merzen Hall, 73% support, 20% oppose, 34% strong support. And the construction of a new recreation center, 77 to 21, with 31% support. So what's going to matter the most, though, is the next chart, because we asked them, how much of a property tax increase would you support for the park improvements? Well, first off, 16% said nothing. That's really low when we're doing a question on support for a property tax increase for projects. We're always surprised if it's less than 30%, whether it's a city or a school district we're working with, saying nothing. So 16% is very low. Where does the average come in? It comes in right at about under $5 a month, $55 a year. So what I tell clients is you take that number and you can apply that to see how much money is generated and look at the cost of the previous four projects to prioritize. Realizing that because you have such high support levels, I'll try to go back on this one. If I just hold it. Well, I can't. You have 75% support or 80% on all four components. So there is some flexibility for it. But in that $6 to $10 range would be reasonable a month for folks with the four projects that you're talking about. How do folks feel about the mayor and city council? First off, we asked, how much knowledge about your work do they have? You actually have a fair number of folks paying attention. What we have found over the course of the pandemic is even less people are paying attention because they're more focused on the pandemic, social justice issues, presidential races, wars, everything like that. You actually have 51% that are saying they're following you at least a fair amount. 48% say very little and 9% say none. How do they feel about the job you're doing? It's overwhelmingly positive. One of the highest we have in the last 5 years. 83% approve, 6% disapprove. This one we do a straight ratio because what varies so much from community to community is the unsure. 16 to 1. The norm is 4 to 1. Favorable to unfavorable. So oftentimes, the more familiarity people have with the knowledge of your work, perhaps the less approval happens. That's not the case. You have more people favorable with more people knowing about what's happening. Similarly, in the city staff, very well regarded also. Less contact, that's obviously been driven down by the pandemic. That had been higher if we asked before 2020. 40% indicate they have at least some contact with city staff, 82 to 8. 10 to 1 ratio, norm on that is 5 to 1. So the city's even twice as high when we look at the ratio the city staff is. Just outstanding both on the governance and the administration side of it. Do folks leave the city of Columbia Heights for principal shopping area? I just thought I'd separate these two and just do they're leaving, they're not leaving. We have all the answers. We know where they're going to shop and everything like that. 58% are leaving the city to shop. name their principal shopping area outside. 37% say no, they're shopping primarily in the city of Columbia Heights, and 5% are purely online shopping entirely now. What about going out for dining and entertainment? 63% indicated they left the city for dining and entertainment opportunities. 37% say they stay. This one, I can't do any sort of norms. It varies. I mean, it's a broad, if I'm looking at the difference between Minnetonka and Champlin. It just varies so much on the offerings, and it's unique from community to community. Where are folks getting their information? What's their principal source? City newsletter, 37% leads the list, followed by the website at 26%, and the local newspaper is actually relatively strong. Very rarely do I see local newspapers anymore in double digits. So 13%, and then 8% word of mouth, 8% social media, 5% mailings, 2% scattered, and 2% nothing. If we look at this as a electronic versus print, where they're getting their information, it's a print-dominated communication network. 37% indicate the newsletter, 13% indicate local newspaper, 5% mailings. You actually have 55% saying their principal source of information is something in their hand. On the flip side, electronic, the website at 26, social media at 8. It's about a third of the community relying on electronic as their source of information. And then finally, an overall evaluation on the rating of communicating with residents. 83% rate communications from the city positively, 16% unfavorable, and 1% are unsure. The norm on this is 70%. It's gone down over the course of the pandemic, but what's also unique here, it's very rare for you to have double digits, much less 20% rating the job you're doing as excellent. When I look at that 20% saying it's excellent, they're primarily city newsletter readers. They're saying that's where they're getting their information. So not only just an overall evaluation, I've gone over a little bit in time here, but I'll do this broad sweeping statement. You have a lot of folks with a lot of knowledge that feel very good about the level of communication they have from the city and about the city, and you have extraordinarily high ratings at the same time. And there's a willingness in the community to invest in the community as you look at the maintenance of city services or expansion of park and recreation facilities that we discussed in the survey. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one question. On one of the very early slides, you said that the 22% of the crime,
The rise of crime.
was determined as being from outside. How was that determined? Was it through questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In looking at when we asked about their feeling of safety in the city of Columbia Heights later on,
Okay.
you could see then
That against those
exactly.
numbers. All right. And then the other question I have is, are we able to get these slides?
They're yours, yes.
Thank you.
I'd say good job, everyone.
I need to change the legend on those two. I apologize. I go so fixated on the colors and getting them right that I mislabeled it. So I'll fix those before you share them with everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank
All right.
you very much.
Thank you.